My name is Professor Rebecca Kobrin. I am the Russell and Bettina Knapp Professor of American Jewish History and the co-director with Professor Elisheva Karlbach of the Institute for Israel and Jewish Studies. Indeed, the Institute for Israel and Jewish Studies is the oldest interdisciplinary institute devoted to the study of Israel in the United States, founded in 1950. I welcome everyone here for coming. This webinar is the second in a current series that we are running to provide forums to discuss, unpack, and analyze all that has developed in the world as a result of the horrific attacks of Hamas on October 7th. We will have future installments, and we look forward to your suggestions of what you would find useful. We hope to bring people from a number of different perspectives to be speaking to this moment. And indeed, I want to ask everyone, just like we had last week, to please ask your questions. These webinars are for you to ask questions from experts who are thinking, and we are all processing all that is going on now. I'd like to also thank the Kay and Knapp family foundations that make all our programming possible. And I would like to thank in the background, Julie Feldman, our associate director, and that for all making this all possible. Last week, we had a webinar in which we heard from Tel Aviv and a report on the ground of how Israel is thinking about everything that has happened from the perspective of Professor Avi Shilon, who taught history of modern Israel just the semester before. This week, our webinar is intended to be a forum for students and all concerned about the current campus environment. I am so grateful to Professor Pamela Nadell, Dr. Britt Tevis, and Rebecca Massel for launching us in this conversation of these really critical matters. So just to introduce the speakers so you understand who is on the webinar today, Professor Pam Nadell holds the Patrick Clenenden Chair in Women and Gender History and is the Director of Jewish Studies at American University. She's a specialist in American Jewish history and women's history. Indeed, her book, American Jewish Women, A History from Colonial Times to Today, won the National Jewish Book Award. And she is currently writing a book entitled Anti-Semitism, An American Tradition, under contract with W.W. Norton, and is supported by a National Endowment for the Humanities Public Scholars Grant. In 2017, she testified before Congress about anti-Semitism on college campuses. She's joined by Britt Tevis, the Renee Plesner Postdoctoral Fellow in Holocaust and Anti-Semitism Studies at Columbia's Institute for Israel and Jewish Studies. She has published articles in American Jewish History and the Journal of American History, and we are all looking forward to her primary source collection of documents, which illuminates anti-Semitism in the United States, entitled Sanctioned Bigotry, a documentary reader of anti-Semitism in the United States, which will be coming out in the future. She has held fellowships in Yale Program Study for Anti-Semitism, the Katz Center for Advanced Judaic Studies at the University of Pennsylvania, and currently at Columbia. And I would very much like to thank, coming during midterms, Rebecca Massel, who is a sophomore at Columbia College studying political science. Currently, she serves as the Vice President of Communications for Columbia Barnard Hillel, and she is also a senior staff writer for Columbia's Daily Spectator, reporting on university-related events on campus. She's going to be leading and offering questions for Professor Nadell and Professor Britt Tevis to answer. So I'm handing it over to Rebecca to get us started on this discussion. But while Rebecca is asking questions, I want to urge everyone to use the Q&A to put questions in, and we will have all your questions answered as this webinar progresses. So thank you everyone for joining, and Rebecca, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for being here. And I guess to begin, can you start by defining what exactly is anti-Semitism?
So, I think right before I do that, and then Britt and I can have a whole conversation about definitions. I do want to say just a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank Rebecca Kobrin for inviting me and for having American University co-sponsor this, because as I know, at Columbia, things are very difficult. Things are frankly difficult on campuses all across the nation. I also want to start with something that comes from Leonard Dinerstein, who wrote the last good book on the history of American anti-Semitism in 1994. And in 2012, he went back and he tried to update it. And he said of the plague of anti-Semitism in America, he said, most American Jews don't see it, feel it, or fear it. What the future brings is impossible to know, but in the United States today, anti-Semitism is too minor an issue to disturb the daily lives of American Jews. And I kind of take that as a guide, because it tells us we historians know a lot about the past, we know something about the present, and we know absolutely nothing about the future, because we are a decade away from when he wrote that. And I also want to say, especially to the students who are on here, that I understand the pain that you're going through. You should know your faculty are also going through so much of this pain right now. And what I've learned in the interviews that I was doing as I've been working on this book is what is astonishing is that a half a century from now, if somebody asks you if you ever experienced anti-Semitism, if you have, you are going to remember it and you are going to talk about it as if it happened yesterday. It is astonishing how much this defines what it means to be an American Jew. So to your question about can you define anti-Semitism, I would say really quickly, so to give it over to Britt, I wrote a guide. I was the lead author on a guide for understanding anti-Semitism that we created at American University in the spring. And we defined it using the language that this was modeled on a guide that was done at Michigan State University. And it's real short. Anti-Semitism is rhetoric, discrimination, prejudice, promotion of conspiracy theories, hostility, and or violence against Jews or Jewish institutions. So that's my definition. But I'll turn it over to Britt to see what she wants to add.
I also want to say thank you for including me in this webinar, and it's an honor to be here in conversation with both Dr. Nadell and with Rebecca and with everyone here who is here in this moment, really to learn and take stock and think about the present through thinking about the past. So the question of what is anti-Semitism, how do we define anti-Semitism, is something that is a question that many historians have asked themselves, many scholars have asked themselves. So there are a number of different ways we could potentially answer this question. And historians and scholars have answered this question in a variety of ways, which I'd be happy to discuss at some point. And I should also add that this is a pretty tricky question. And the fact that there is so much debate about what precisely is anti-Semitism, what constitutes anti-Semitism, what doesn't, what are the boundaries, speaks to the complicated nature of anti-Semitism. That being said, of course, I have my own definition of what anti-Semitism is. And to my mind, anti-Semitism is a political program aimed at denying Jews civil and political rights and equality. And it is motivated by Christian theology, by racial science and racial ideology, and by conspiratorial thinking. And it is manifest in words, in discrimination, in bigotry, in anti-Jewish violence. So at the most meta level, abstractly though, it is a program aimed at denying Jewish equality.
I think that's perfect. I mean, as you said, scholars argue about this, but I don't think in the moment we're in right now, we really need to be arguing a whole lot about what constitutes the definition, right?
Definitely. Okay, so I guess kind of jumping off of that question, there's been a lot of conversation on college campuses I know firsthand, but really around the nation, about the difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. And would you be able to speak to the difference between those two terms?
So I'll let Britt lead off. We'll
I
go back and forth.
who's
It's just-
gonna-
Oh, do you want
I
me
was gonna
to?
say, yeah, please.
Oh, you want me to? Okay. So the first thing I would say is that since Israel's establishment in 1948, anti-Semitism has been aimed at the world's only Jewish majority state, which actually might then raise issues about some of the things that Britt was saying in definition. But the Zionist movement led to the establishment of the state of Israel. Zionism upholds the Jewish right to national self-determination. That's a right protected under international law, and anti-Zionism denies that. So I think in terms of understanding, especially thinking about the campus, and I think part of the problem is that Americans don't really understand the complexity of anti-Semitism, and they don't understand how central Israel is to Jewish identity. So, for example, there's the Pew Research Center located in Washington, and twice now, they've studied the American Jewish community, and people in academia consider their results really reliable. And in 2020, they found that a large majority of American Jews, actually 82%, said caring about Israel is either essential or important to what being Jewish means to them. So while criticism of Israel is not equivalent to anti-Semitism, when it crosses a line and it becomes, and it moves from anti-Zionism to anti-Semitism, and anti-Zionism denying Israel the right of national self-determination, you could also say is anti-Semitism. But when it moves to using language and symbols that move over to hate speech, we've moved into anti-Semitism. And also in terms of students, when students are told that they have to disassociate themselves from any support that they have for Israel in order to participate in any aspect of campus life, then we've crossed the line to anti-Semitism, because connection to Israel is such a powerful part of what it means to be a Jew.
I think I'll just add to that by saying, first, it's a really, really fantastic question that you've asked. And you've really identified one of the major debates within the field of anti-Semitism studies, which is where are there similarities and where are there differences between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, and how do we distinguish between the two? And in thinking about the differences, I first want to highlight a similarity between the two, because there are some differences and there are some similarities. And the first is thinking in like a very meta level, a very broad level, which is the broadest possible context of modern Jewish history. And there's a historian named David Sorkin who wrote a really wonderful book called Jewish Emancipation, and it is an examination of the last 500 years of Jewish history. And in this incredible work, he tells us that the last 500 years are best understood as the process of Jewish emancipation, as the process of Jews gaining rights and losing rights, and gaining rights and losing rights in the places that they lived. And if we think about emancipation as the process of Jews gaining rights, anti-Semitism is a political program in an effort to undermine those rights, to take the rights back, to say to Jews, you don't have equal rights in these places. So for example, in the United States, in certain states after the revolution, there are certain states that Jews could not publicly worship in, or practice law in, or vote in, right? Those are denials of rights and a denial of equality for Jewish citizens. That's just one set of examples. So Zionism enters the picture here in thinking about anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, in that Zionism is a manifestation of the failure of emancipation across Europe. Because Zionism in its original intention was thought of as a place that Jews needed a homeland because of the incapacity for the places they lived to incorporate them as full equal citizens. And so Jews stopped and said, well, we need a place where we can be full equal citizens. Where should we basically set up shop? And so the same moment in which anti-Semitism, this effort, this anti-emancipation, anti-Jewish emancipation effort emerges, Zionism is in large respect one answer to the question of the failure of Jewish emancipation across Europe and in some cases North America. How do we look at the differences? What are the differences between, because we can't say that all efforts, all critiques of Israel constitute anti-Semitism. So this is something I'm still personally thinking through in my own scholarship, but I know that there are some very clear answers, One place in which it's a very clear answer is violence. When actions are, when we're not talking about just rhetoric, but we're talking about actual anti-Jewish violence, that is a very clear place that I say, you know what, right? Because ultimately violence and murder are the ultimate denial of civil and political rights. And so violence is one area in which, to my mind, there's really no question whether or not that constitutes anti-Semitism. I think one thing that's really important to say, and then I'm going to stop, is that on the one hand, it's important for us as scholars, and especially in universities, to hold space for the capacity to criticize the actions of the Israeli government when we feel it's appropriate or we think it's appropriate. And at the same time, it's important to understand that advocating for the elimination of the state of Israel and as alongside its people constitute anti-Semitism insofar as you're advocating for the elimination of Jewish life. And so it's really looking at the space in between those two extremes that we need to be thinking about how to distinguish anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism.
Thank you. Can I just ask a clarification question or a follow-up question? Are there, I guess, specifically to you, Professor Tevis, are there specific slogans that are generally used against Israel that you would consider anti-Semitic or crossing that line?
You know, I've given a lot of thought to this, and I sometimes will go online and look at images and say, does this cross my internal? Does this, fit the definition? And I want to bring up just one specific example, which I've encountered on campuses in my own life when I was a student and subsequently, which is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I've had conversations in which I've been told that's a metaphor. That saying is a metaphor. It is about a spiritual struggle for Palestinian freedom. I've also heard that slogan is intended to mean that the elimination of the state of Israel. And so I think this is one of those circumstances, like many historical circumstances, which is really context-based, and it's really about the individual speaking. And the slogan itself doesn't give us enough information to determine whether or not that those words or ideas are necessarily anti-Semitic. Whereas in some other cases, there are some pretty clear signals that death to Jews is not really interpreted, cannot be interpreted as anything that's saying death to Jews. So there are circumstances in which slogans can tell us everything we need to know, but in many cases they can't. And so, and just to go back to the previous question, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, these are terms that have been, the definitions of which are disputed and continue to be disputed. And you really need to understand how people are deploying those terms in order to answer the question of whether or not one, anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are overlapping when in that particular conversation or not.
Thank you. So this webinar focuses specifically on anti-Semitism on college campuses. So is there any way that as historians you could talk to how that's changed over time? In America specifically, sorry.
Right. Britt, do you want to start or you want me to start?
I'd love to hear your reflections on this.
So first of all, there have been different expressions of anti-Semitism on college campuses for a very, very long time, but I will actually really focus starting in the late 1990s. But they have not, I think the big difference is they have not always been about Israel. So for example, in the 1990s, there were a group of Holocaust deniers who began taking out full-page ads in college newspapers. And I'm imagining this happened at Columbia. I don't know if it happened at American University. And the ads they had titles like The Holocaust Story, How Much is False? And it led to a big debate on campus about free speech. Because people would write, letters and articles, and, can we make their views known? Is it legitimate to make their views known? Some school papers accepted the ads, some didn't, some accepted them and then talked about them in editorials. It was interesting. The interesting response in terms of the campus was that all of a sudden there was an explosion of Holocaust classes on campuses. Following the 90s, and many of them, like mine, I would teach the history of the Holocaust, and I talk about Holocaust denial as a phenomenon in that. So that was a place where anti-Semitism sparked something that actually led to something that was really pretty positive in the end. In 1995, Louis Farrakhan, whose name is often associated with anti-Semitism, Farrakhan organized what he called the Million Man March in Washington, D.C., and it led to a lot of tension on different campuses between African-American students and Jewish students over his anti-Semitism and that march. But we have a sense already from as early as 1968, we have a sense that the American Jewish community is aware that there's anti-Zionism, anti-Israel sentiment on campus. And if there are any students on here who are looking for a great senior thesis topic, please do a deep dive into your college newspapers, because we really don't know what was going on the campuses in those years. But we have, I could give you examples from 1968 up until 2000 of where students are saying, they're already as early as 1973 they're printing something in the newspaper and it's a Jewish star, and on top of it is the Nazi swastika. So we have that kind of evidence already from going back. But the kind of things we're seeing now, the extent of the vitriol, that really dates to around the first Intifada, starting around 2000. And I could give more details, but I want to give my colleague a chance.
That's so interesting. I think what you said about the emergence of Holocaust studies on college campuses. I hadn't thought about that in conjunction with Holocaust denial and how we see that curricular change. And I also hadn't thought about like you just historicized Holocaust denial in a really fascinating way. And I hadn't thought about that. I really, that's fascinating. I'm really, I'm going to be thinking about that probably all night.
I'll give you the source where I got it from. It's not
it's
not my insight.
So the only thing I wanted, I guess, to add to that are on chronologically or on the extreme ends, which is to say that there's a really rich history about anti-Semitism on college campuses, starting in the early 1900s. Many of us are maybe somewhat familiar with this history, which includes anti-Jewish quotas at prestigious elite Ivy League institutions, as well as at least a handful of incidents of housing discrimination by university systems, including Syracuse University and at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. A scholar named Nadell and Britt just wrote a really fascinating article about anti-Jewish surveillance and the surveillance of Jewish students and Black students at the University of Minnesota during the 1930s. This surveillance was premised on the presumption that all Jews were radical communists and therefore necessitated surveilling. So there are quite a number of ways that scholars have looked at anti-Jewish discrimination in college campuses. Just one more is also in faculty hiring. For a very long time in American universities, and in particular in the humanities, it was very difficult for Jewish intellectuals and Jewish academics to secure positions, and in particularly in fields that were thought of as representing key components of American culture. So teaching American history, for example, was thought of Jews weren't capable because they don't really get American history. So they're not really American. How can they be? They're not Christian. So we have employment discrimination, housing discrimination, educational discrimination insofar as excluding Jewish students. As far as this moment and thinking about really the environment on campus, I want to also honor the ways in which what's going on campus reflect our broader society. And even though crime statistics, in fact, in our country are dropping, there are certain kinds of crime, and I think related to online activity, in which we're seeing just more frequent identification of individuals and really like public attacks that are facilitated by online environments. So, and we see judges left and right who are being intimidated in their homes. And in some cases, family members have been murdered by constituents. I mean, the former president is in fact targeting numerous sitting judges. And so there is this broader cultural moment of violence that I think we're also seeing that's somehow exacerbated by the online space in which individuals are being targeted, often with very unfairly, but in a way that before our social media platforms existed, I don't think we would have seen in quite this way. So I think that's a component of how the manifestations of anti-Semitism we're seeing on campus is reflective of this much larger problem that we are faced with right now.
Thank you. And then my last question before we open it up is, given our dedication to free speech in this country, is there anything that you think university administration should be doing to prevent anti-Semitism on campuses from spreading?
You want to start, or you want me to? You want me? You keep wanting me to start. In a word, yes, there is a lot that our administrations can be doing. And I think one of the most important steps is they need to understand what anti-Semitism is, and they need then to respond to it adequately when they confront it. And I mean, that was really the motivation behind my writing that guide, Understanding Anti-Semitism, for the American University campus, because to be honest, universities don't really like it when various different kinds of advocacy organizations just drop in on the campus. We get a lot of pushback. But when our own faculty are developing something to educate us, it gets much greater recognition. And that was, I believe, the motivation also that led the Michigan State University, our colleagues at Michigan State, to develop it. And it's a time-consuming endeavor for sure, although the people at Michigan State really did the yeoman's work. But we need to educate our administrations. That's the first place to start. And unfortunately, that burden ends up falling on the Jewish Studies faculty to do it. But it's possible to do. And now I know that the guide that I was the lead author on worked with a lot of wonderful colleagues on this. But I know that it's being used on campus as a way to educate. We need to educate the RAs in the dorms, right? We need to educate people who are doing our DEI work. They need to understand that anti-Semitism is a form of hate that is being expressed on the campus now, and that is going to mark the lives of our students for the rest of their lives.
I completely agree that the first task at hand, at least for administrators, is of course to actually take interest in anti-Semitism and treat it seriously, and actually engage with conversations with experienced and wise faculty members who actually, such as Dr. Nadell and Dr. Kobrin, who actually have witnessed and seen these problems emerge on campus and have done a lot of deep thinking about what to do and how to address it. I think a second important endeavor that administrators can take is to create spaces for students to not only engage, of course, in kind of classic college campus political expression and activity, but also create spaces such as this one for genuine learning and thinking, and really a place for slow and deep thinking about what anti-Semitism is, what Islamophobia is, what is the relationship between these two. I know that whenever there are political scientists have shown that whenever there are episodes of violence in Israel and in Palestine, there is a severe uptick in anti-Jewish violence, physical violence in the United States. I don't know whether that's true in the case of the Muslim community. It very well may be. I just have not been exposed to those studies. But given that we do know that there is an increase in anti-Jewish violence as a result when these episodes happen, I think that there needs to be messages, shared among university employees and university faculty members to watch out for their Jewish students in the time periods, after these events, because we know that Jewish students are targeted directly after these moments. So creating spaces for dialogue, creating learning opportunities for students to really educate themselves, and genuine dialogue, and also looking out for Jewish students' safety. I think a third important task that the universities really ought to think about taking is concerns reminding faculty not to target Jewish students. One component of one dimension of the fallout from October 7th that I have personally found truly shocking is just the number of faculty members and academics across the United States who have taken this moment to single out Jewish students in their classroom for punishment, to publicly shame them, to publicly bully them without having any idea what that particular student's politics may or may not be, where their political commitments may or may not be. I mean, whatever they are, it is been, for me, as someone who operates within academic spaces, both shocking and disappointment. And I think it'd be very useful for university leaders, across the country to remind faculty that's incredibly inappropriate.
Let me just add, those are titles. I think a lot of those are Title VI violations, and that we're going to see a rash of Title VI cases filed with the Department of Education, and I think they should be.
So I want to just thank you for starting the conversation. I want to thank the audience for bringing so many questions. So I'm going to start to field all the questions. So a big question is, can you comment on what is taking place today? And it comes in, I'm going to ask 3 specific questions. I'm going to read them from the authors. One is, the first question we got is, wearing a keffiyeh. Is it okay for a TA in a Middle East related class to wear a keffiyeh to class or make comments on Instagram, thereby intimidating Jewish students? If not, what should be done about it? That's 1. 2, a question for Professor Nadell. I have a question for Professor Nadell in particular. What do you think about American University has now, for the 2nd year in a row, experienced an anti-Semitic attack through vandalism or graffiti, namely talking about a swastika, which the reason I'm very happy, these are different examples, the keffiyeh, the swastika, and then we got a question of, could you comment on, hold on, sorry, I just want to get it. What do you think of the Alums for Campus Fairness arranging for a truck to be stationed on the University of Pennsylvania campus, urging Penn's president to resign due to her permitting the Palestine Rights Conference to take place on campus? So I'm giving you 3 separate instances from 3 different campuses. And Pam, if you could go first, then Britt, and Rebecca, if you have anything to say, you can add in. And then I'm going to get to other questions as well.
Well, one of the things that Britt said before is that what's happening on campus is really a reflection of what's happening in the United States at large, right? And this also is not new. We've had some of the things that students are experiencing on campus now being targeted by faculty. We have lots of examples of that happening before this particular moment, before October 7th. So on the issue of the faculty member wearing the keffiyeh in class, that to me would be, if I were a student sitting in that class, a Jewish student with strong identity for Israel, I would probably feel threatened. If the keffiyeh is a religious symbol, that's a different story. But I certainly, that would be my reaction on the one hand. On the other hand, we hit and Rebecca said this. I mean, we live in a world where we have free expression in the United States. And so these things are always in tension and in conversation. And I would say that the faculty member might be expressing a political view versus thinking about making the students in the class comfortable. And if it were my teaching, I would want to make the students in the class comfortable. What happened in American University this week was that there were several swastikas that were graffitied on campus, this time on a door of 2 Jewish students in their dorm room, and in the men's bathroom, where obviously there are no cameras. And we did have a case last year also of a swastika that had been carved into a desk. And while I'm not minimizing this at all, because identifying these Jewish students that way is horrific on the one hand. On the other hand, these seem to be acts of relatively small groups of people, and they are not the same kind of thing that we're seeing in terms of the massive confrontations on for example, on the quads of the various campuses, with the 2 groups yelling at each other, and calling for, however you want to interpret, Palestine should be free from the river to the sea, using that. So, and the alumni at Penn are exercising, again, it's this question of free speech. So they are exercising in a very striking way free speech on campus. They've got enough money to go pay for a truck, and so to call for the resignation of the president. The problem is, I don't think they're actually thinking about what's best for the students, because again, should the students be hearing that and dealing with that in that way, shape, and form? But the fact that they're doing that is this indication of how ratcheted up we are in terms of everybody's level of anxiety. And so it's one thing for them to say, and to write the letters and say to the press, we're not giving our money any longer. But it's another thing to actually go and disrupt campus. So I don't think that was the right thing to do. But these are all my opinions, but that's where we are at this moment. We're dealing with opinion.
Britt, do you want to respond, or I have more questions because there's a lot?
I'll just respond to 2 things. One, of the keffiyeh issue, I think I would need a few more details, such as, was this faculty member regularly wearing a keffiyeh, and if so, then or was this done intentionally as a post? Was it only October 8th, for example, as a mechanism for intimidation? By and large, I am an advocate of people wearing whatever makes them comfortable and happy in whatever space they're in. And I certainly know that I would be frustrated to learn, for example, if the kippah were interpreted as somehow a political garment, and people were told you can't wear kippahs in class anymore. I know that would be frustrating for me to hear, and I think I think even fall into illegal. So I would not advocate for people to be told what to wear. As far as and I think this is happening on many campuses, efforts to stymie speech through calling for the resignation or of faculty members, or for people to step down. I think those efforts are something of a fool's errand. And I don't mean, so there's a small, tiny handful of faculty members we've seen who have posted on Twitter calls for additional deaths of Jews. Those people, I think, are rightfully being removed from classrooms and have no place teaching students. But as far as people who hold political views that I certainly don't agree with and make me uncomfortable, those faculty members, it pains me, and I think it's a fool's errand to advocate for their removal or dismissal. And if anything, I think particularly for students who don't agree with those faculty members, it may be very useful to in fact enroll in those courses, not so that one can necessarily leave that class subscribing to that particular faculty member's views, but so that students can actually learn them and really understand them. So much of the conversation, so many of the conversations I hear on campus and interactions, it seemed to me to be very surface level and in some ways performative. I hear a lot of slogans. I hear a lot of academic jargon, in fact. But when I scratch the surface and say, what do you think settler colonialism is? What is that? I often am met with, I don't know. Or, well, what are the big debates about settler colonialism? Are there some ways in which Israel doesn't fit the paradigm that you're claiming it fits? Well, it's often the case that I have found that a lot of people like to sound smart and use this academic jargon, but actually don't have the real wherewithal to argue for or against the use of certain language. And so I think often enrolling in courses in which our own views don't fit those of the people who are teaching us can be very helpful, because we can't kill ideas. And so it's a silly effort to try, but we can really come to learn and understand other people's thoughts and ideas. And through that understanding, either advance our own perspective, widen our own perspective, change our perspective, or change others in a way that I do think can be fruitful and help advance the purpose of why students are at universities, why academics are at universities, which is, a search for truth and to enable everyone to be, good citizens of the world.
So thank you. So I want to thank everyone for keep your questions coming. If we don't answer it within this hour, you will be hearing from the speakers. So I'm grouping together another group of 3 questions, which deal in general of how we can address this moment, what Jewish studies can do, how do we, as the person said, how can we educate administrators who are so important to understanding how the campus operates? How do we educate our progressive Jewish friends? But I want, at root is a question of these different definitions out there of anti-Semitism. Does that weaken how we do all this, how Jewish studies programs operate, how we educate administrators, how we educate other groups, and to think about anti-Semitism in this moment and its relationship to anti-Zionism?
Britt, you should take it first. I've taken all of them first.
I like to defer to wisdom. So I'm not going to answer the question about administration because I have minimal experience in that arena. As far as the ways in which the multiplicity of definitions of anti-Semitism may affect and inhibit our capacity to educate. If you're suggesting it's complicated, I don't know why you think that. I'm just, yes, it is. It's extremely complicated. It is difficult because anti-Semitism and its various manifestations are in often cases hard to understand as necessarily being grouped together. That being said, I think that the evolving definitions of anti-Semitism have helped certainly each generation of scholars to better understand what exactly anti-Semitism is. And I think it just comes with the territory of studying the subject is reconceptualizing or rethinking exactly what it is being studied.
I just want to interject and read the question. As a follow-up, can you talk specifically about the balance between academic freedom, anti-Semitism, and anti-Zionism when it comes to the university administrators taking specific actions? And then I add on that, what can Jewish studies do? What are we supposed to be thinking about and doing and actions in this moment?
So I'm sure many of the people who are watching know that various campuses made one initial statement after October 7th, and a lot of campuses, including my own, made a second statement subsequently. And so what is it, that we can do? So one thing that I don't think anybody's going to adopt, but the University of Chicago doesn't make statements. They decided a long time ago they don't make statements. And when I was in conversations about the second statement that our president was going to issue, I told that to her assistant. I said, you would really save a lot of time if we were not in the business of making statements. But what can Jewish studies do? And is essentially what happened on my campus. We got one of these opening statements, the president deploring the loss of life, but I felt grossly inadequate. And I wrote I sat down after I got it. I wrote a letter. It's not usually the kind of thing that I do. I said that in the letter. I sent it to the president, and I wasn't the only one who wrote our president. And to her credit, she thought about this long and hard. She spent 20 minutes on the phone with me, which for a president is a lot of time. And I know that she spent a lot of time on the phone with others who wrote. And in the end, decided to issue a second statement that actually deplored the atrocities that had happened. And so faculty can influence administrators. Yeah, it takes a lot of time, and it's certainly something that, you know, it will happen in some places, and other places it won't happen. But we got on my campus, we got the response that I think that we really needed to reassure the Jewish community on campus. And I mean, obviously she also knew that I've been working on this. I've been teaching a couple of years now, a freshman seminar called Anti-Semitism Enduring Hatred. And I've been speaking pretty widely about it on my campus. So there was the sense that I and some of my colleagues were reputable, I guess. They could understand what we were saying. But in terms of the different definitions, those are scholarly debates, and they are what we argue about among ourselves. I think out in the world, most people just know it's the hatred of the Jews. They don't really follow what the you know, the differences between the IRA definition and the Jerusalem definition. They're just not interested in that. I can tell you, in the book I'm currently writing, I'm not going there. Like, I'm going to have like a basic definition, and I will point people to where they can go if they want to really like come down to it and argue about the different definitions.
Okay, so there are specific questions about this relationship between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. And there's a few threads throughout about thinking how the Palestinians, I'm trying to understand campus anti-Zionism in the context of Britt Tevis's definition of anti-Semitism as denying Jews' rights. How does saying Israelis are murderers or Israel should not exist deny American Jews' rights? That's one. Another theme of that is to be thinking about the definitions that we use for anti-Semitism, how they're applied when you think about the Palestinian population. That is a question. What is the way that can be talked about? And this is a larger question about thinking about anti-racism scholarship that centers and frames Israel as a settler colonial state, and thinking through how that fits into this larger discussion of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Okay, so I've pieced together several questions, but I think you're understanding where I'm going, how to discuss this very complicated issue.
So as far as how discussing the existence of the state of Israel denies American Jews' rights, it's not so far as rhetoric, either explicitly or implicitly suggesting or advocating for the elimination of the state of Israel denies American Jews' rights. It does deny the rights of Jews, Israeli Jews specifically, and actually Israelis generally. And for American Jews, many of whom have political commitments to Israel and or direct familial ties to Israel, the idea and being asked to witness the denial of rights of other Jews is extraordinarily difficult and painful, both because of, in historical terms, a relatively recent history, and the Holocaust, of course, and which I should add, given that the world Jewish population today remains smaller than it was before World War II, it means that many, if not most, American Jews are just one or two handshakes away from the violence and of the October 7th massacre. And that has some real profound emotional implications for most American Jews, regardless of their political loyalties or commitments to Israel. And so the denial of Israeli Jews' rights is an emotional issue as well as a political issue for Jews. And so I think that that's the connection there. I know you asked two other questions, but my brain really just got very caught up in thinking about October 7th, Dr. Kobrin. So if you can remind me of
It's in general about the relationship between anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, how, right, talking about how many, your definition, how that would apply, we think about the Palestinians. And I just want to insert, I'm sorry, this is a new question that just came up, which I actually think is fascinating. Are students and faculty supposed to think about this treated differently by the university? Should we have different expectations of faculty versus students? This is a larger question about free speech, academic freedom, and is it different for students and faculty and administrators, I would put in there. So I think this is a larger, just reflecting on many of the things we spoke about, but it's really applying to today.
I'd like to talk, I'll talk about the students and faculty in a second, but I want to talk about where you asked about the, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and essentially the settler colonial narrative, because that's really what the question is about. And what we've seen in academia is we've seen that there has become dominant in certain, especially in certain disciplines. There's become dominant a kind of particular discourse about being anti-racist means having to fight against all different forms of settler colonialism and oppression. And so the Jews are never seen as a people that are oppressed. Instead, in the contemporary world, they're seen, especially in the United States, as very successful. And whenever one encounters any kind of if a Jew says that's anti-Semitic, or somebody says something that is against the state of Israel, that then is their, the default is that you're not part of you're not fighting racism. You're not part of this, anti-racist battle, and you need to make a choice. I mean, that's really what's happened on campuses, is you have to make a choice. The student, and this has been going on for a long time, not just now. The students who were told they cannot be part of the environmental justice organization on campus, because the environmental justice organization on campus has been having a big discussion about Israel. And unless they say that they are opposed to the existence of the state of Israel, they can't be part of that organization. So is there a distinction between this narrative that has actually become very dominant in certain fields like American studies, anthropology, women's studies? Is there a distinction between what happens to students and faculty? And the reality is that there are faculty who would be uncomfortable, Jewish faculty who are supporters of the state of Israel, would be uncomfortable in certain departments on campus, on various campuses, because they haven't bought into that particular narrative when it applies to the state of Israel. And we're seeing that around academia, as well as obviously the students who are finding that they're uncomfortable because they're being forced out of various organizations. In both cases, I mean, in the student case, I think they're Title VI violations. Britt Tevis is a lawyer. I'm not, so she would have a better sense. But in the sense of faculty, there isn't anything that can create spaces for them if those are the dominant narratives in those departments. That's my sense. I don't know.
I concur entirely, and the only thing I would add is that I think this is the long-standing trends or phenomena that Dr. Nadell just pointed to, which go back decades. I think speak to the importance of classes such as the one that Dr. Nadell teaches at American University, and courses that really examine these narratives which deploy academic jargon. One of which is the notion of Jewish whiteness. One of which is the notion of settler colonialism. These are academic terms and modes of analysis that that scholars debate and have debated for many, many, many decades. And when they're deployed in political contexts in campus, rallies and debates, they are used for advancing particular policy positions, but they aren't actually examined in those contexts. And what the most important thing is, and the only way to my mind to really move the needle, at least among rational people, is to actually sit down and learn what the history of these terms are. Why are they being used? By whom? When? And in what contexts? And only when we come to understand when, where, why, under what circumstances, can we see whether or not these terms are appropriate in any given moment, and advocate why they should or should not be used in these political spaces. And I think students are, in fact, well, in particular, Columbia students, from my limited experiences, are eager. I'm sure American university students are eager to, in fact, engage in this kind of learning, where they learn about the origins and history of these ideas, so that when they encounter them out in the world, both in political spaces on campuses and beyond the campus, they can assess for themselves the validity of those terms.
Dr. Tevis, that was spot on.
Yeah, so I want to just end with, there are more questions, and we will be sending your questions to the speakers and they will respond. But there is this question: should there be limits to academic freedom in times of crisis? That is one part of the question. And the notion, someone else asked, should professors be allowed to hang Israeli flags, Palestinian flags in their office? But the notion of how in a time of war and crisis, do certain academic freedom, or should administrators be acting differently? That is a big question. And Pam, I really liked how you said that some universities just don't make statements. We are institutions about engaging different ideas, not about making proclamations about certain view, so I would love that goes into it as well. And I think this is the last question. So if you could keep your answers succinct, so we could, as we said, it would just be an hour. And thank you, everyone. Just keep sending your questions. We promise to answer them all.
I'll be really, really quick. The last time that I remember that there was an effort to limit academic freedom was during the McCarthy era, when people had to sign loyalty statements. I don't think there should be any kind of limits on academic freedom. But on the one hand, on the other hand, there are things that cannot be done in the classroom. You cannot intimidate students in the classroom for any reason, and for any kind of student. You just can't do that. We need to create our classrooms as spaces for learning, where we respect all of our students and demand that all of our students respect each other.
100%.
Yeah, Britt, do you have anything to add?
I 100% agree.
Okay, so I'm gonna say I'm sorry that we don't have more time. I want to thank our speakers. First, Rebecca, thank you for launching us. Professor Nadell, Professor Tevis, I want to thank everyone for coming, and for this is the beginning of a much longer conversation as events unfold. And I thank everyone here for really starting us on this discussion and thinking about how to address what is going on. If you enjoyed this event and want to continue engaging, the Institute for Israel and Jewish Studies is co-sponsoring an event with JTS on Wednesday night, October 25th at 7 p.m., which I should say, thinking through everything going on, we need it now. It is a lecture called Love in Dark Times. It's a panel discussion of Jewish philosophers, friendship and eros in Jewish theology, literature, and ethics. So please join us there. Please go to iijs.columbia.edu for more details of how to sign up to our website and to events and be notified so you can join our future webinars, which we will have more. I thank everyone for joining us today, and I want to in particular thank the panelists for doing this on such short notice. And thank you everyone for coming. And I thank again the K and Knapp Family Foundations and the staff at IIJS for making this possible. So thank you to everyone.